If you came across this podcast, you may have typed in, "Do you know him?" If so, who or what are you looking for in life? If you'd like to talk to someone about this, or if there is something you'd like to hear about in a future episode, then please email us at doyouknowhimpodcast@gmail.com. And now on to today's episode.
Thank you for stopping by. This is the Do You Know Him podcast. My name is Lowell King. I'll be your host today. Today's podcast is entitled Defining Moment Number 1. I wasn't exactly sure how to define what a defining moment was. I kind of had in my mind what I thought it was, but I went into the dictionary and their explanation is an event which determines all subsequent related occurrences. And I thought, well, how can I break that down so people understand what I'm saying as a defining moment? I think it's something that happens that changes your life in such a way that you're just completely turned around and you're going in a different direction than you thought you were going to be going. And all of a sudden, life changes dramatically over a single event. I can't help but wonder, how do these things occur? Who's orchestrating that? But rather than get into that side of the discussion, I want to tell you the story of what actually occurred. So this one particular morning, and I should add to one other little sideline, is that I'm working for a mortgage investment company as a sales manager. It's a small company, but very successful company at that time. And I had a nice home that I lived in. I was driving a sports car. I was single, going through a breakup of a previous relationship, but I was very happy. I thought my life was going in the direction that I wanted it to go. And all of a sudden, this one morning when I got to work, I came in and there was this, like the can of snow that kids use, where people use when they decorate their Christmas trees on at Christmas time. Someone had taken a can of that spray and sprayed it all over our windows and our front door of our office. So when I came in, of course, I'm dressed in a three-piece suit and tie and the whole thing, and I'm, looking around and I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, who did this to the windows. And I asked one of the ladies, and she said, "I have no idea. That's the way it was when we came in." And I said, "Oh." And all of a sudden, this little memory thing came popping into my head, lead by example. And I thought, well, I don't want to delegate this to somebody else. Who would I delegate it to anyway? We don't have a janitor on staff. So I thought, well, I'll just get the material and I'll go there and I'll clean the window myself. And maybe that's a good example for other people. In fact, somebody should have actually done that before I got there, but I thought, well, I'll just do it myself. So I was outside cleaning the window, and all of a sudden, this young lady came in. I had no idea who she was or why she was there, but apparently she was coming in for an interview for one of the office jobs. And so I got out of the way, and I opened the door, and she walked. Well, in fact, looking back on it now, and just comments that I have had with this person since then, I found out that she didn't even notice me. She was so focused on going in for the interview, and I don't even think she said good morning or thank you or whatever. I just opened the door and let her go in. But for some special reason, this young lady drew my attention in such a way that I don't know how to explain it. And it was just, I see people every day. I walk by people in the stores. I walk by people in my office, and the list goes on. And we all do. We all have these situations where we see people and you see a quick glance of them and move on. But for some reason, this person, and really I didn't even see her that much, but I saw her long enough to see her walk in and ask somebody or tell somebody that she was there for this interview. And of course, I continued to clean the windows. And I finished up the job and I put my jacket on and I went back into the office. In our office, there was a mezzanine area that was like above the main floor, and it was open so that you could look from the top floor down to the bottom floor. And so I was standing there talking to two of my friends, Rich and Mike, and uh, for some reason, I don't even remember how the conversation went. The young lady walked out of the office where she is being interviewed, and she walked to the left, and she meandered down to one of the secretaries that was working in the office, and apparently they knew each other. And I later found out that yes, in fact, the other lady, Michelle, had actually referred this young lady for the job that we had available. And I saw them talking downstairs. So uh, for whatever reason, I don't even know how this came out of my mouth, but I looked down and I pointed her out to both Mike and Rich, and I said, "You see that young lady down there?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm going to marry her." And where that came from, how did that come out of my mouth? I have no clue. And they both laughed at me and they said, "Well, who is she?" I said, "I have no idea, but I'm going to marry her." And they said, "Yeah, right. Well, yeah, we'll see it when it happens." So no sooner did she leave, and I was right down to talk to Michelle, her friend. And I said, I just saw you talking to this young lady who came in, and I just wonder, is she a friend of yours? And she said, yes, we used to work together. And I said, well, I'd like to get to know her. And she said, well, she doesn't go out on blind dates. She had a really bad experience with somebody, and she doesn't go out on blind dates anymore. And I said, well, Michelle, you're my friend. You have to try to figure out a way to get her to let me meet her, because I really am interested in knowing her and finding out a little bit more about her. So anyway, Michelle said that she would go ahead and call this young lady and see if she could arrange something for us to have a cup of coffee or chat or whatever. But I said, well, we're having a Christmas party in about a week, and I said it's really going to be nice. It's supposed to be catered and so on and so forth, and it's a large group of people. Maybe she'd feel comfortable in that environment. So I said, maybe you could ask her if she'd like to come to the Christmas party and be my guest. So she called her, and unbeknownst to me, uh, one of the things that my wife now, Cecilia, happened to be that she liked was good food. And so, anyway, to make a long story short, uh, she finally talked her into coming to the party. Now, you would think that that would be, you know, at least an introduction, and where would it go from there? But almost immediately, from the very first day that she and I met and talked with each other and spent some time together, I really had this magnetism towards her that I don't know how to explain, but I really started believing that what I had said about marrying her might actually come to pass. Well, I had no idea about what was going on in her life. All I knew is she told me that she worked for a company that was there in Fremont, California, and that she was in the collection department of a financial institution. And I said, well, of course, after that night on the way home to drop her off, I said, well, maybe we could go out next weekend. What's your schedule like? Can we get together? She said, well, I can't because I have a date. And I very boldly, unfortunately, I was very egotistical and very bold in those days. And I looked at her and I said, well, break it. And she looked at me and she says, I don't break dates. She says, I'm sorry, I already made a commitment. And I said, well, okay, then we'll do it another day. If you can't do it on Friday, let's do it on Saturday. And she kind of looked at me and she says, well, let me think about it and I'll call you. Or you call me in another few days. I forget now how we settled it. And of course, we wound up going out on that date. But basically, that was the last date that she ever went out with another person. something very strange happened a few weeks later. Uh, I really was beginning to feel like the relationship could go somewhere. And all of a sudden, my boss called me one day and said that he wanted me to open an office up in the Sacramento area. Well, that was a long ways from Fremont, about 100 miles. And I thought, well, I don't want to go to Sacramento unless if this relationship is going somewhere. So I said, okay, let me uh, tell you tomorrow. So I contacted Cecilia and told her what had happened. And so we decided that we would go up and start looking to see if, I told, not for her and I, but I was going to go up and see if there was any homes to buy up in that area. And I wanted to know if she'd like to go with me. So, which she did. And we went up and started looking around up there. And I did, in fact, find a home that was up there that I liked. It was on about 5 acres by Newcastle, California, which is now, I wish I would have held on to that property, but that's another story. But anyway, went through the process of getting approved and getting ready to put the offer in. And as it turns out, the company I was working for was actually going to do the loan on the property. So it was pretty much a done deal. It didn't require a lot of approval and so on and so forth. So we made the offer on the property. And all of a sudden, this whole idea that I was going to be separated from her, and this is after a few weeks of dating and all, and I said, I really don't want to go without you. If you are interested in more permanent relationship and whatever. Well, anyway, make a long story short, on Christmas Eve that year, before I actually made the move to Sacramento area, she and I became engaged. And we opened the office up there, and I was actually staying in a hotel, so I would come home on the weekends, but I was there during the week, and I would be able to see her on the weekends. But it's kind of funny how that all worked out, because I look back at it and I think, how could you just look at a person? In fact, how was it that I felt motivated to be the one to clean the front door? And if I had not done that, I wouldn't have been there at the moment she walked in the door. I would have been upstairs in another office, and I wouldn't have even known that she actually came into the office. And how was it that I would be standing in the top of the mezzanine when she walked out of the office downstairs and walked over, and I saw her talking to her friend Michelle? How was it that I happened to be standing there, both for cleaning the door, then to see her come out, and then how was it that this whole thing came into being, that she and I came together? I was thinking about, in the Fremont area, I have many, many Indian clients. Probably 80% of my clients are from India. And many of those family friends that I've gotten to know from India will tell you that their marriages were arranged by their parents. And it's interesting that the parents know the children, and they come from the same cultural background, so on and so forth, and they believe that the best thing for the child is to let the parents pick out their mate. And sometimes you wonder, how does that work out? Well, it seems to work out probably just as good as the way that we do it in America, because to be quite frank with you, I certainly wasn't the best at picking out relationships, and had not really found the right person. But in my particular case too, and I've shared this in other podcasts, is that I was trying to find a relationship that would fill the void that I felt that only God could fill. And I didn't realize that until later in my life. But the fact of the matter is that I was still on the hunt. I was still on the search, trying to find that perfect woman that would love me unconditionally. But the only person who could ever do that would be God himself. but I didn't know that at that time. So it's interesting that God already had planned out the person that he wanted me to marry. He had already planned out the person who would be the mother of my children. He had already planned out that morning that I would get there at the very moment that I did, including all the traffic lights that could have delayed me or got me there on time, for my car to be pulled in, put it on my heart to go ahead and clean the window myself so that I could be there to open the door for her, and put it on my heart to be standing at the mezzanine at the very moment she came out of the office downstairs. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know how if that makes sense to you, but the reality is it happened, and that was 38 years ago. We just celebrated our anniversary yesterday, and I'm just so happy that it happened, and I'm so happy that she's my wife, and so happy that we've had our good 38 years, and that she's been a good Christian woman and a good Christian mother for my children. So this is Lowell King, the guy who orchestrated all of what occurred that day. I'm just wondering if I ask you this question. It's the same question I ask every single day. It's the most important question, by the way, that anyone will ever ask you in your entire life. Do you know him?